Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving deep into a book that I know a lot of you have been asking about, and I'm really excited to finally get to it. It's Atomic Habits by James Clear. We're all about getting right to the heart of things here on the Deep Dive, and I think what really resonates with me, and I bet with a lot of you listening, is that we're busy people, right? We want to learn, we want to grow,
Yeah.
but who has time to wade through a 500-page self-help tome?
Right?
Exactly. So today's deep dive, this is your cheat sheet. We're going to pull out those golden nuggets from Atomic Habits, the stuff that can really make a difference in your life. So buckle up.
Yeah. And, one of the things that really drew me to Atomic Habits was, well, it's right there in the title, Atomic, right? Clear takes this, sometimes overwhelming idea of habit change and breaks it down into these really manageable pieces.
Oh, I like that. Manageable pieces, that's what we need. It's not about these huge sweeping life overhauls. It's about those tiny, almost invisible shifts that over time can create massive change.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he talks about this idea of the plateau of latent potential, which I know the name sounds like a little intimidating,
Yeah, it's kind of like, what is that?
but it's such a great way to visualize how habits work. Like, uh, imagine you're trying to melt an ice cube.
Right.
You apply heat, and for a while, it seems like nothing is happening.
Right, just sits there taunting you.
But the effort isn't wasted.
It's like it's building up to something.
Exactly. You're building potential energy, and then suddenly, boom, you hit that critical temperature, the melting point, and the ice just melts away.
It's that aha moment.
Yeah, it's those small, consistent efforts, like they accumulate over time, and eventually you reach that breakthrough. It's like they say, it takes years to become an overnight success.
Oh, I love that. It's funny how those overnight successes are, usually years in the making. And that brings us to one of my favorite quotes from the book. Clear called habits the compound interest of self-improvement. And man, is that ever true.
Yeah, small changes applied consistently yield remarkable results.
It's almost like magic, but it's not magic, it's science. And Clear backs it up with research. He talks about a study where they helped people develop exercise habits. And get this, the group that had a very specific plan, like I'll go to the gym right after work on Mondays and Wednesdays, that group, they had more than double the success rate compared to those who didn't.
Wow, that's amazing.
It really is. Because, I think sometimes we get bogged down in the, should I work out today? Should I not? We waste so much energy on that back and forth.
Decision fatigue is real.
It is. And so having that plan, it takes away the need to make that decision in the moment. You've already decided.
Like you're on autopilot.
Exactly. But, sometimes I think about if I'm too rigid with my habits when I become I don't know, a robot or something,
Right.
where's the room for spontaneity?
Well, it's not about eliminating spontaneity. It's more about strategically removing that decision fatigue from situations where you really want to, stick to that habit. Like how much brain power do we waste each day just deciding what to eat or what to wear?
It's true. It's the little things that add up. But I'll admit, just going through the motions of some pre-programmed plan, that doesn't exactly sound, inspiring.
Right.
And that's where I think Clear really takes it to the next level with this idea of identity-based habits.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most powerful ideas in the book.
It is. He says, habits are the path to changing your identity. And he goes on to say, the most practical way to change who you are is to change what you do.
I love
So
that.
it's like this light bulb moment. It's so simple, but it clicks,
It does. And it gives all these really great examples. Like each time you write a page, you are a writer.
Yeah. Or every time you, go for a run, you're a runner, even if it's just around the block.
Right. Every action is a vote for the type of person you want to be.
I love that. It's like you're casting a vote for your future self with every single action. And I think, before we dive into those actions,
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand that foundation of, the habit loop. Clear breaks it down into these 4 stages. Can you walk us through them?
Yeah. So the 4 stages are cue, craving response, and reward. And it's this cyclical process. So a cue triggers a craving, which motivates a response, and then you get the reward.
Okay, so let's say my habit is I want to go for a walk after lunch every day. So the key would be finishing lunch.
Right.
And that triggers a craving for fresh air, movement,
Yeah.
getting out of my chair.
Exactly.
And then the response is, well, me actually getting up and going for that walk. And the reward, maybe it's just feeling energized or, I don't know, enjoying the sunshine.
Perfect example. And, Clear connects this back to our ancestors, right?
Mhm.
They were responding to cues for survival, finding food when they were hungry, or shelter when there was a storm.
It's fascinating to think about how our brains are still wired that way.
It is. But now we're responding to these cues for like secondary rewards, like money or praise, or even like those little dopamine hits from social media.
It's like we've upgraded our rewards, but the basic wiring is still the same. So I guess the big question is, are we really in control of our habits, or are we just puppets, dancing to the tune of these cues and rewards that are all around us?
Well, that's a great question. It's something that Clear really digs into. But the good news is, by understanding these mechanisms, we can start to exert more control.
Okay, I'm all for more control. So if any part of that loop breaks down, the habit fizzles out, right?
Right, exactly. If there's no cue, then there's no craving.
Yeah.
If there's no reward, well, there's no real reason to repeat the action.
So we have to make sure all four of those stages are in place.
Yeah. So if we want to build better habits, we need to figure out how to like manipulate each stage to work for us.
Okay, now we're talking. And that brings us to Clear's 4 laws of behavior change. And the first one is make it attractive.
Oh, that's a good one.
I think this is where things start to get really interesting, right?
Yeah. And it all boils down to like anticipation. We're driven by the anticipation of a reward. It's that dopamine hit that we get when we're looking forward to something pleasurable.
It's like how a really good movie trailer can get you so excited to see a movie,
That's a great analogy.
even if the movie ends up being kind of disappointing.
Totally. And Clear talks about this experiment with mice. The researchers gave them dopamine every time they poked their noses into a box.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, and as you can imagine, those mice became a little obsessed with that box. They were
Oh,
poking it hundreds of times an
oh
hour.
my gosh, that's crazy. But okay, so how do we translate that to our own lives? Like, how do we harness the power of anticipation without, you know, turning into box poking addicts ourselves?
Right, so Clear has this really cool strategy called temptation bundling. It's basically linking an action you need to do with one you want to do.
Oh, okay. So like if I need to do the dishes, but I want to listen to my favorite podcast, I could like bundle those together.
Exactly. By pairing something, less enjoyable with something you love, you're kind of tricking your brain into associating that need with a positive feeling.
That is so clever. It's like a built-in reward system.
It is. And speaking of like our surroundings and routines, there's another important piece to consider here, our environment.
Ah, the power of place. And that brings us to Clear's second law, make it obvious.
Yeah,
I'm seeing a pattern here. Each law kind of builds on the last one.
they do. They work together. And visual cues are a big part of making it obvious.
Yeah.
We process visual information so much faster than anything else. Like, did you know we have like 10 million sensory receptors for sight out of 11 million total?
Wow. We are visual creatures.
We are. And Clear gives this really funny example of those stickers they put above urinals in the Amsterdam airport.
Oh, right. The little
Yeah,
flies.
just by giving men a visual target, they reduce spillage by like 80%.
No way. That's amazing.
It is. It just shows how even those little visual cues can make a big difference.
It makes me think about all the visual cues around us that are like subtly influencing our behavior, maybe without us even realizing it.
Totally.
Are we really in control or are we just like responding to those cues on autopilot?
That's a really good question. And I think, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. But by being aware of those cues, we can start to like design our environments to work for us rather than against us.
Yeah, instead of being surrounded by temptations, we can create spaces that make those good choices easier and, make it harder to give into those bad habits.
Right.
So, like, if I wanted to eat healthier, I could put a bowl of fruit on the counter instead of, like, hiding it away in the fridge.
Exactly. You're making the healthy choice the obvious choice.
It's like setting yourself up for success.
It is. And, that leads perfectly into Clear's third law. Make it easy.
Oh, I am all about making things easier,
Right.
especially when it comes to habits. So, how do we put this into practice?
So Clear talks about this idea of friction. Even small amounts of friction can make a big difference in our choices. Like, how much more likely are you to watch TV if the remote is already sitting on the coffee table?
Oh my gosh, that is so true. Just that little bit of effort of like getting up to find the remote, it can be enough to, make me think twice about it.
Right. And Clear has these great examples from his own life, like he used to drink too much beer, and so he started hiding it in the back of the fridge. He even deleted social media apps to make it harder to check them all the time.
So it's not about having this like superhuman willpower. It's more about being strategic with your environment.
Exactly.
You're making those desirable behaviors the easiest path.
The path of least resistance. And that leads to the 2-minute rule, which is one of my favorites.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
Okay, so the rule is when you're starting a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. So instead of go for a run, it becomes put on my running shoes. Instead of write a chapter, it's open my laptop and write one sentence.
Okay, that seems almost too simple, but I can see how that could really work.
Right. It lowers the barrier to entry. And once you've done that tiny thing, well, you're much more likely to keep going.
It's brilliant. And it reminds me of that idea of casting votes. Even those tiny actions can reinforce your desired identity.
Absolutely. And speaking of reinforcement, that brings us to Clear's fourth and final law. Make it satisfying.
Ooh, yes.
This is all about tapping into those reward systems in our brains, making those good habits stick.
I have a feeling this one is going to be good.
It is.
I love a good reward, but unfortunately, we're going to have to pause our conversation right there for now.
Oh, man.
But don't worry, we'll be back soon with part 2 to dive into those satisfying rewards and so much more.
Can't wait.
See you then.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're picking up right where we left off with James Clear's Atomic Habits and that fourth law of behavior change, make it satisfying. Yeah, it's all about those rewards.
Yeah, rewards. I mean, who doesn't love a little something to look forward to, right? But I think, we've got to be strategic about it.
Oh, absolutely. And Clear makes this really important point about our brains being wired for instant gratification. That can make it tough to stick to habits that have those long-term payoffs.
Yeah, that's so true. It's like we want the results now.
Right. And he has this, what he calls the cardinal rule of behavior change.
Hmm.
What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
From an evolutionary standpoint, our ancestors needed to focus on those immediate needs for survival, finding food, shelter, all that. But in today's world, that wiring can make it tricky to prioritize things like, I don't know, saving for retirement or eating healthy. The payoff isn't always right there in front of us.
Exactly. Think about going to the gym. The long-term benefits are amazing, right?
Mhm.
Better health, more energy. But in the moment, it can feel like a lot of work. Sweating, sore muscles. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we make those good habits feel, well, satisfying in the short term?
Yeah, because let's be honest, if it doesn't feel good, it's going to be hard to keep doing it.
Right. And Claire has some really great ideas for this. One is to use habit trackers, those visual measures of progress. Like that classic example of the salesman who moved paper clips from one jar to another every time he made a sale.
Oh yeah, simple but effective.
It is. It's like you're gamifying the process. Every paper clip moved is a little victory.
I love that. It's visual, it's tangible, it gives you that immediate sense of satisfaction.
Exactly. Another great tactic is to choose rewards that actually align with your identity. So if you're trying to become a runner, rewarding yourself with some new running shoes after you hit, a certain mileage goal, that's much more effective than rewarding yourself with, a big bowl of ice cream.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's like the ice cream might give you that instant sugar rush, but it's not really supporting your long-term goal of being a healthy runner.
Exactly. The running shoes, on the other hand, they're reinforcing that positive association with running. They're helping you build that runner identity.
So it's like you're casting another one of those votes with your reward. That's so cool. But, even with all the best strategies in place, there are going to be days when motivation just goes out the window.
Oh, absolutely. We all have those days. Even those people, with the strongest habits. Motivation comes and goes. It's fickle. But environment, that's something you can actually control.
That's so true. I remember Clear quotes an Olympic coach in the book who says, motivation is overrated. Environment often matters more.
Yeah,
So it's about creating that space that supports your habits, even when you're not feeling it.
that's the idea. If you have to rely on willpower all the time,
Yeah.
you're going to lose that battle.
Because willpower is kind of like a muscle. It gets tired.
Mm.
So if I'm constantly having to resist those cookies in the pantry, eventually I'm going to give in.
Right. But if you just don't buy the cookies in the first place, well, the decision's already made for you.
Genius. And speaking of decisions, I think we need to talk about something kind of counterintuitive that Clear brings up, which is intentionally making things more difficult sometimes.
Oh, that's a good one, especially for breaking bad habits. He uses this really extreme example of the writer Victor Hugo.
Oh, yeah. I love Victor Hugo.
He was notorious for procrastinating.
Yeah.
So get this. He had his assistant lock away all of his clothes except for a big shawl.
No way.
Yeah. So he had nothing to wear outside. He was basically trapped in his house, forced to write.
That's pretty intense. Not sure I'm ready to go that far.
Right. Of course, we can apply this in less dramatic ways,
Yeah.
like putting your phone in another room when you're working or unsubscribing from those like tempting email lists that make you want to spend money.
Or maybe investing in one of those time-locking safes for your phone.
Exactly. You're just increasing the friction.
Yeah, make those bad habits harder to do.
Exactly.
That reminds me, we have to talk about technology.
Oh, yeah,
It can be such a double-edged sword when it comes to habits.
it can.
Because on one hand, it can be amazing for like automating those good behaviors, tracking our progress, setting reminders.
Totally.
But on the other hand, it can be a source of endless distractions and temptations.
Oh, yeah.
It's like we're constantly battling against these incredibly sophisticated attention-grabbing machines.
Right. Like, how Netflix automatically plays the next episode or how social media just keeps you scrolling forever.
It's designed to keep us hooked, but I love the idea of like harnessing that same power for good.
Oh, absolutely. Clear talks about that a lot, like setting up automatic savings plans or using apps that, block those distracting websites or even those fitness trackers that keep track of our steps and sleep and all that.
It's like you're putting those good habits on autopilot,
Yeah. It takes the decision making out of it.
which frees up our brain power for other stuff.
Right. But even with all of these amazing tools and strategies, we got to remember we're human. We're going
Yeah.
to make mistakes. We're going to slip up.
There are going to be days when even the smallest habit feels impossible.
Absolutely. And that's where self-compassion comes in. Perfection is not the goal here.
It's progress, not perfection.
Exactly. Clear says, never miss twice. So if you miss a day at the gym, don't beat yourself up about it. Just get back on track the next day.
Yeah, don't let that one slip up turn into a full-blown habit derailment.
Hmm.
But, it brings up a good point. How do we measure that consistency? How do we know if we're actually making progress?
That's where reflection comes in. It's crucial for those long-term habits.
Yeah. Okay.
Clear recommends doing like an annual review where you think about, the past year and what you want to achieve in the next year.
Yeah. It's like taking stock of your habits and making sure they're still aligned with, your goals and values.
Exactly. He also suggests keeping a decision journal. So writing down those big decisions you make and like why you made them.
I love that. It's almost like having this written record of your thinking. It can help you, spot those patterns, those blind spots.
Absolutely. And it ties back to, shaping your identity through those actions and decisions.
It's like we're weaving together all these different pieces, the habit loop, the four laws, the environment, technology, reflection. It's like this tapestry of lasting change.
I love that. That's beautiful. And as we, put these ideas into practice, I think it's important to remember that habit formation isn't just about like productivity or achieving those external goals. It's also about creating a life that feels, meaningful and fulfilling.
Totally. It brings us back to those identity-based habits. It's not just what we do, but who we become along the way.
Exactly. And that's such a powerful reminder that we actually have the ability to shape our own destinies, one small habit at a time.
I love that. And speaking of shaping our destinies, I think we have time for one more piece of the Atomic Habits puzzle before we wrap up.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What is it?
Well, I think we need to touch on something that Clear brings up throughout the book. This connection between habits, desire, and happiness.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Because he makes this point that, happiness can be kind of fleeting. Like as soon as we achieve one desire, another one pops up. It's like that saying, the grass is always greener.
Right.
So if happiness is always, just out of reach, how do we actually find contentment in the present moment?
That's a great question. And I think that's where habits come in.
Okay, I'm listening.
So Clear says, desire initiates action, but pleasure sustains it. It's about finding ways to make the process itself enjoyable, not just focusing on that end goal.
So it's not just about the destination, it's about enjoying the journey.
Exactly. If we can find a way to like genuinely enjoy the process of building those habits, we're much more likely to stick with them.
And ultimately, that's what leads to lasting change.
It is. It's about finding those little moments of joy in those everyday actions.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation, but unfortunately, we've reached the end of part 2. Don't worry, though. We'll be back soon with part 3, where we'll wrap everything up and give you some actionable takeaways to put all these amazing Atomic Habits principles into practice. See you then. And we are back for the final part of our deep dive into Atomic Habits. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty fired up to put all this amazing knowledge into action.
Me too. It's one thing to, read about these concepts, but actually applying them to our own lives, that's where the real magic happens.
Exactly. So let's do a quick recap. We've talked about the habit loop, the 4 laws of behavior change, the power of our environment, the role of technology, the importance of identity. I mean, we've covered a lot.
It's like we've taken this like crash course in the science of habit formation.
We have. But before we send you off to, conquer your habits, let's distill a few key takeaways. Think of this as your cheat sheet for, actually putting these principles into action.
I like it. Cheat sheet to better habits.
So what would you say is like the most important takeaway from Atomic Habits, if you had to pick just one?
Oh, that's a tough one. But if I had to choose, I'd say it's the power of starting small.
Oh, yes. The 2-minute rule?
Exactly. It seems so simple, right? But it's profound. By breaking those big, intimidating habits into those tiny, manageable actions, we eliminate that initial resistance, the thing that usually stops us from even getting started.
It's so true. It's like instead of, trying to run a marathon tomorrow, you focus on like putting on your running shoes.
Right. Or instead of writing a whole book, you just write one sentence.
Exactly. Those tiny actions, they might seem insignificant, but, they create this ripple effect.
Yeah, you build momentum, you gain confidence, and as you start to experience those wins, even the tiny ones, it changes how you see yourself. You start to identify as that person who, takes action, who follows through.
You're casting those votes for the person you want to be.
Exactly. And, another key takeaway is that it's not all about willpower and motivation
Oh, preach.
because, those things come and go. Environment matters.
Oh, it matters so much. It's like if my environment is working against me, if I'm constantly surrounded by temptations, it's going to be an uphill battle.
It is.
So part of this is about being strategic, right?
Yeah,
It's
for
like
sure.
designing your environment to support your goals. So like if I want to read more, instead of having like my phone right next to me on the couch, I could put a book there instead.
Exactly. Or like we talked about before, unsubscribing from those tempting email lists or putting your phone in a different room when you're working.
Yeah, it's about making those good habits easier and those bad habits, well, a little bit harder.
Friction. Add a little friction to those things you don't want to do.
Love it. Okay, so we've talked about starting small, we've talked about environment. What else? What other nuggets of wisdom should we be walking away with?
Well, we got to remember that, it's a journey, not a sprint.
Oh, absolutely. It's about those small, consistent efforts over time.
Right. And it's going to take longer than you think. So be patient with yourself. You're going to have setbacks. You're going to have days where you just fall off track completely.
We all do.
But the important thing is to get back on track as quickly as possible.
I love that Clear says, never miss twice.
Yes. It's about building that consistency. It's
Yeah.
not about being perfect.
Progress over perfection.
Right.
But how do we, how do we actually track that progress?
Well, Clear gives a few really great suggestions, like, doing an annual review where you kind of take stock of your habits, your goals, see what's working, what's not.
It's like a yearly check-in with yourself.
Yeah, exactly. He also suggests keeping a decision journal where you write down, those big decisions you make and why you made them.
Ooh, I like that. It can help you identify those patterns, those blind spots.
Totally. And it's all about, becoming more aware of our choices and how those choices shape who we are.
Wow. This has been like seriously mind-blowing. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of how habits work and how I can actually change my behavior for the better.
Me too.
But before we say goodbye, I want to leave our listeners with a little challenge.
Okay, I'm game. What is it?
I think everyone listening should pick one tiny habit they want to build or break. Something so small, so ridiculously easy that they can't talk themselves out of it.
I love that. Start small, right?
Exactly. It could be like drinking a glass of water first thing in the morning or taking a 5-minute walk after lunch.
Or, just putting your phone away an hour before bed.
Perfect. And then just focus on doing it every day for the next week.
Consistency is key.
It is. And, just pay attention to how you feel. Notice any changes in your energy or your mood.
And don't get discouraged if you miss a day. Just get back on track.
Exactly. This is about progress, not perfection. And remember, those tiny changes, when you do them consistently, they can lead to those amazing transformations.
They can. It's been so great diving into Atomic Habits with you.
The feeling is mutual.
Yeah.
And to all of our amazing listeners out there, thank you for joining us. We're so excited to see what positive changes you create in your own lives. And remember, you've got this. One small habit at a time.